Hey guys, it's the Chad. And if you're looking to swap out the headlight and wiper switches of your old 67 to 72 Chevy or GMC truck, I'm glad you're here. Swapping these things out, it's not impossible, but it's also not that easy. If you've watched from any of my previous videos, you know that trying to get your hands up underneath one of these dash panels, it's a real pain. So in today's video, I decided to go through and give you guys some tips and tricks to make swapping these guys out a little bit easier. To get the headlight switch out, the first thing you need to do is pull the headlight rod knob out all the way to the on position. And this is where guys screw up because they just try to spin this rod all the way out until they break the switch. Yes, it will spin back and forth, and it's supposed to. One way to turn the dome light on, and the other way to dim the instrument cluster lights. So don't spin it out. The only way to get the rod out is, one time, reach your hand up underneath the dashboard and feel around to the top of the switch. You'll feel and see the spring-loaded button right here. Now, if your headlight's out all the way to the on position, you just depress the button and pull it straight out. The thing you need to be careful with now is your headlights are on constantly. That's why I tell you guys to disconnect the battery. Unfortunately, the only way to get these instrument clusters out is you're going to have to pull the headlight rod and any of the knobs for the wipers, the choke, or the throttle. So now we have the headlight rod out, we can remove this decorative bezel. To do that, I just grab these small needle nose pliers and stick them in the groove to loosen it up. Then you can just spin it counterclockwise all the way out. Behind it, you're going to find a double-threaded retainer nut, 5/8 inch, and a lock washer. This is the point you need to decide, are you going to take the instrument cluster out, or are you going to reach your hand up all the way in the back side of the dash to remove the switches? I'm going to elect to go through and take all the knobs and rods out first. That way I have full access to the dash. Then I'm going to move over to the wiper switch, and it's going to be a little bit different because there's no rod here, it's just a knob itself. So to get this out, there's a flat blade set screw in the bottom of the knob. So you don't need to take it all the way out, just loosen it and then it'll pull right off. This is a great time to go through and inspect it. If you can see on the top of the actual knob itself, there's a flat spot, and that coincides with the actual switch where it's flat there. If this is all wallered out, it's a good time to go through and replace it, but if it looks good like this one, just set it aside and we can reuse it. And just like we did on the other side, you can grab your needle nose, loosen up the bezel, spin it off counterclockwise. And on this side, for the wipers, you're going to have another 5/8 inch nut and a lock washer. Now at this point, we can decide if we've loosened everything up on the back side of the instrument cluster, we can actually pull the whole cluster right on out. Now we have full access to all the switches, wires, and cables. And this is the easy way. So now that we have full access to the dash, we can go through and remove our 5/8 inch retainer nut, just loosen it up. And the same thing over here on the wiper switch. As you go through and loosen these up, don't lose the lock washer and the nut. The only thing that'll be holding these on afterwards is just the wire plugs. Now there's not a whole lot of slack to either one of these. So when you get those off, pull it straight out. Now this would be your wiper switch. And once you pull the retainer nut out here and washer, you're going to need to unplug the plug to the actual headlights as well. And this would be the switch. If your truck's equipped with a manual throttle, you would have the same type of knob that the wipers would with this flat blade set screw. If it came with a manual choke, the way to remove this one would be you will pull the choke out just a little bit and then grab you a pair of pliers and clamp down on it, and then you will actually spin the knob counterclockwise until it comes off. If it's your plan to replace the switches, you need to make sure you're buying the right one for your year of truck. Not all these switches are universal from 67 to 72 like a lot of companies advertise. In 1967, the headlight and wiper switches were year specific. The wiper switches, they were actually wired up on the negative leads, where 68 to 72, they were on the positive side. And then when you get to the headlight switches, in 1967, they used an 8-pin switch, whereas 68 to 72, they used a 7. Well, what was the difference between the two? Well, check out what the 67s could do with an 8-pin. When you pulled the park lights on, yeah, they illuminate. But if you go through and pull the full headlight switch on, watch what happens to the park lights. Yep, they go out. So that's not a gremlin, just be aware that's a 1967 thing. If you want to find out what else is year specific to 1967, check out this video. If you got your dash open this far, this would be a good time for a little bit of maintenance. If you've been neglecting to swap out some of your bulbs, ducts, or hoses, this would be a great time. So once you've got all the maintenance done, we're going to go through and grab our switch and reconnect it to the plug. Make sure it's in there good and firm. If you take a look at the actual switch itself, it has a little tab here on the bottom, and that'll coincide with this little cutout here on the dash. Then go back and grab your double-threaded retainer nut and washer. The small side is what goes into the actual switch. Get those lined up. And this is why I say having the cluster out makes things so much easier. Then we can move over to the wipers. If we take a look at the top of our wiper switch, you're going to see that there's a flat spot on the top of the switch that's going to coincide with the flat spot on the top of the dash. So we'll slide that through, make sure that gets lined up, grab our lock washer and our 5/8 inch nut, and we'll screw it down. And again, make sure that these are lined up before you really start tightening them down. Grab your wrench and get them snug. Once we get all the switches tightened down, then you can go back and grab your instrument cluster, make all your connections on the backside with the speedo and the oil pressure line, and then we can go back and install our decorative bezels. Oh, Chicago. Then we'll go through and grab our washer knob. And again, make sure you got the top of the knob lined up with the top of the switch. Tighten it back down. And then grab your headlight rod and stick it back in to shut the headlights off. Next thing we need to do is make sure we reconnect the battery and test everything out and make sure it works. Like I said, this isn't an impossible task. You just need to know what you're doing. So now you guys have seen a couple different ways to remove and install the switches in a 67 to 72. If you guys know of any easier ways to do it, well, type it down in the old clickety-clack, and while you're there, hit that like button and subscribe. And make sure you check out my other 67 to 72 videos. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.